Hey guys, welcome to Fatal. I'm your host, Beth McCarty. Welcome to episode 5. I just wanted to go over a couple of things first. I need to give a shout out to Gary Dugdale for becoming a new patron of Fatal and donating at the $3 or more price point. And you can earn your shout out by doing the same. Just visit patreon.com/fatalpodcast. You can also join the Fatal page on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/fatalpodcast. Be sure to join the discussion group that's actually attached to that page. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and review this podcast. Your review can help the podcast reach so many new listeners. Thanks to all the Fatal fans for all that you do. Now, on to the episode. This episode is about 3 lost girls. These girls were seriously there one day and then gone the next. Were they dead, kidnapped, runaways? So many thoughts were running through the minds of everyone in their community, not to mention their families. That is until Aurora Marty was out on her neighbor, Angel Cordero's porch, just chit-chatting, when all of a sudden, they heard a frantic scream come from across the street. She looked over and saw a hand reaching out a gap in the door, and a woman was yelling, "Help me, help me. My name is Amanda Berry, and I've been captured for 10 years. Like everyone in Cleveland, Aurora knew about Amanda Berry, and that she had disappeared a decade earlier, the day before she was to turn 17. And she was never heard from again. A year after Amanda's disappearance, Gina DeJesus had also gone missing. She was 14, and she was only a couple of blocks away from where Amanda had also been seen. It was suspected that the 2 girls' disappearances were connected somehow, but no one knew how. Aurora yelled back to the mysterious woman that Amanda Berry was dead, and everyone knew that. The woman responded that she had been captive in that house for 10 years by Ariel Castro. Aurora had known Castro for more than 22 years, and she liked him. He was popular in the neighborhood. He was a school bus driver. Aurora also knew that he had a terrible temper and could sometimes become violent. He used to beat his ex-wife until she finally left him. Aurora went up on the porch, and she tried to pull the storm door open, and Amanda was pushing from the inside, but the door was locked from the inside. Another neighbor, Charles Ramsey, overheard all the commotion, and he came over to help the screaming woman. He and Aurora both kicked the bottom panel of the storm door until it broke open, and Amanda Berry came crawling out. Amanda was wearing a dirty white tank top and blue pants, and a few moments later, a little girl crawled out behind her. She was wearing a black wig and pink tights. Angel said that they needed to hurry up and leave because if Castro came back, he would kill them all. Amanda picked up the little girl and they ran across the street. She was asking for a phone to call the police. The little girl was yelling for her daddy and trying to run back into the house they had just came out of. Amanda used the phone. She called the police. And she said that her name was Amanda Berry. The operator asked her if she needed police, fire, or ambulance, and Amanda said that she needed the police. The operator asked what was going on, and Amanda said she had been kidnapped, she had been gone for 10 years, but that she had just escaped. Here is the 911 call.
Cleveland 911, you need...
Hello, please. Help me, I'm Amanda Berry.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here. I'm free now.
Okay, and what's your address?
2207 Seymour Avenue.
2207 Seymour. Looks like you're calling me from 2210.
Huh?
Looks like you're calling me from 2210.
I can't hear you.
It looks like you were calling me from 2210 Seymour.
Yeah, I'm across the street. I'm using the phone.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors. Talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, talk to the police when they get there.
Okay. Hello?
Yeah, talk to the police when they get there.
Okay, I'm on the way right now. I
We're
need
going
them
to send
now.
them as soon as we get a car open.
No, I need them now before we get back.
All right, we're sending them, okay?
Okay, I mean, like,
Who's the
right
guy?
now.
Who's the guy you're who's the guy who went out?
His name is Ariel Castro.
All right, how old is he?
He's like 52.
All right, and
Steven, I'm Amanda Berry. I've been on the news for the last 10 years.
okay, I got that
With
here. I already.
Gina.
And you said what was his name again?
Ariel Castro.
And is he white, black, or
He's
Hispanic?
Hispanic.
And what's he wearing?
I don't know because he's not here right now. That's
When
why
he
I got
left,
away.
when he left, what was he wearing?
Sweetheart, it's a pity. What?
Right, the police are on the way. Talk to them when they get there. Okay?
Okay.
I told you they're on the way. Talk to them when they get there. Okay?
All right, okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cleveland police officers Anthony Esparta and Michael Tracy were in their squad car nearby when an alert came in from a dispatcher saying that she had just received a call from someone claiming to be Amanda Berry. They turned on the lights and siren and raced to the address given. Amanda rushed up to the police car when it arrived. Officer Tracy recognized her immediately. He asked Amanda if there was anyone else still left in the house. Amanda said there was, and it was Gina DeJesus and Michelle Knight. Ariel Castro was born in 1960 in Puerto Rico. He grew up with his family, including 9 brothers and sisters. He graduated from high school in Cleveland, Ohio in 1979. He met his girlfriend, Nilda Figueroa, in the 1980s. Her family said that he was really good to her at first. They had their first child, a son, in 1981. Soon after becoming a father, Castro's behavior towards Nilda started changing. He started abusing her. He punched her in the face, broke her nose, ribs, and arms. He also threw her down a flight of stairs, cracking her skull. He treated her as if she were his property. He isolated her from family and friends and controlled every aspect of her life. Nilda became pregnant again in 1982, and the beatings became worse. He punched her in the mouth and knocked 2 of her teeth out. And Nilda gave birth to their second child in 1983, a little girl. Nilda was pregnant again in 1988, and when she was 9 months along, Castro beat her over the head with a barbell. She had been to the hospital several times, but she also denied the abuse and would never let personnel call the police. Nilda finally got fed up and called the police on him after one of his beatings, and he was put in jail for assault, but she didn't leave him. In 1990, Nilda gave birth to their 4th child, a daughter. She was their last child together. In 1991, Castro was hired as a school bus driver for the Cleveland School District. Castro bought 2207 Seymour Drive from his uncle in 1992. It had 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and a basement. It was a bad neighborhood when Castro moved in, and Castro had set a crazy set of rules for Nilda to live by. She couldn't watch TV, she couldn't use the phone, she was basically used as his slave. He had padlocked most of the doors in the house, and would not let Nilda or his children into other rooms of the house. Castro was also abusive towards his son. He beat him with a belt often, and one time he even beat him with a dog chain. Castro never abused his daughters, although they were witness to the beatings of their mother quite often. At the end of November, Nilda had brain surgery, as she had started suffering from seizures. A month after her surgery, Castro came home drunk and attacked her. Their son broke up the fight and the police were called. Castro took off and the police were searching for him when they got a call that he was back at his home address, beating on the door, trying to get Nilda to let him back in. The police arrived and he fled, but was caught. Castro was booked in the jail, but the next day Nilda came in and said she wanted the charges dropped. The prosecutor was reviewing the case and decided to take it in front of the grand jury. Castro was seen in court and freed on a $25,000 bail. He was ultimately not charged for the crime since Nilda would not testify against him. Nilda was attacked by Castro again at a later date, and her son ran to get help. This time, Nilda walked out the door for the last time. She took her 4 children, and they moved in with her mother. Michelle Knight was born April 23, 1981. Michelle had led a hard life. She lived in a bad neighborhood, and she struggled in school because she was kind of slow. Her mom supported the family by being on welfare. Michelle was sexually molested by a family friend starting when she was 5. The molestation happened almost daily, and she was threatened and told not to tell anyone. Michelle ran away from home when she was 13 to escape her home and the molestation. She lived on the streets for months before getting involved in a drug gang. She was put up in an apartment and paid $300 a week to become a drug runner until the ringleader got busted, and then she was left homeless again. Soon afterwards, a family friend spotted her on the street, and that friend called her father. Her father showed up and grabbed her and put her in the car. He drove her home, and her mother insisted that she go back to school. At 17, Michelle became pregnant. It was reported that the baby was the result of a gang rape by 3 boys, and it had happened in her school. Her mother wanted her to have an abortion, but she wanted to keep the baby. On October 24th, 1999, 18-year-old Michelle gave birth to a baby boy, who she named Joey. Michelle was a devoted mother, and she dreamed of finding a good job to help support her and her son. Soon after Joey was born, Michelle's mom, Barbara, invited her new boyfriend to move into their house. He had a history of drug use and abuse, and he was a heavy drinker. In June of 2002, Michelle came home and found her mom's boyfriend lying on the bed, with her son Joey nearby. Barbara was supposed to have been watching the baby. The boyfriend began lunging at Michelle and making inappropriate comments towards her. Joey was so scared that he wet himself, and the boyfriend grabbed little Joey by the leg and fractured his knee. Michelle told the doctors at the ER that her son had fallen in the park. She was too scared to tell him the truth. She didn't want her son to be taken away. But while at the ER, the boyfriend's sister called the hospital and told them what had really happened. Police were called, and the boyfriend readily admitted it. He was charged with child endangerment and felonious assault. Joey was placed in foster care until social workers could investigate the Knight's home and make sure it was a safe environment for the child. In late June, Michelle moved out of her mom's house and rented a room at her cousin's place. She was focusing on trying to get her son back, as well as finding a job to support him. Michelle fell deep into a depression after her son was taken, so her cousin Lisa tried to introduce her to new people to help her get a social life. And soon Michelle met Emily Castro. This was Ariel's 14-year-old daughter. Michelle and Emily became friends, even though there was quite a big age difference. Like I said, Michelle was a little slow, so she was used to hanging out with younger kids. On Thursday, August 22nd, Michelle had an appointment with social services about her son Joey. She didn't know exactly where the office was, and she was told by a family member that they would give her a ride there, but that ended up falling through at the last minute. So Michelle set off walking to her appointment. She was wearing a white shirt, cut-off jean shorts, and sandals. She got lost and was running late, so she went into a Family Dollar, and she was going to use the phone and ask for directions. Ariel Castro was driving around Clark Avenue, and he spotted Michelle asking people for directions. He pulled up on the next corner and got out and followed her into the Family Dollar store. He walked up to Michelle Knight and said he knew how to get to the social services office. Michelle recognized him because she had seen pictures of him and over her friend Emily talking to him on the phone. Castro offered to drive her to the social services office, and Michelle immediately accepted the ride. He walked Michelle out to the car and opened the door for her. Now, she said that she noticed that there were no handles on the doors on the inside of the car, and she had kind of wondered why, but she never questioned it to him. At around 3 p.m., Castro pulled into his driveway on Seymour Avenue. He told Michelle he needed to stop in real quick to check on some puppies that he had for sale. Michelle said she initially waited in the car, and he came out a few minutes later and asked her to come in. He wanted her to choose one of the puppies to give to her son. Michelle agreed, and she got out of the car. He led her into the house through the back door. He guided Michelle up some stairs and into a small pink bedroom, slamming the door behind them and locking it. Michelle screamed out in fear and begged him to let her go. She had that appointment and she didn't want to miss it, she said. She then said that he came up to her and he placed a hand over her nose and mouth, and then put the other hand on the back of her head and pulled off her glasses. Michelle was no match for her attacker. He threatened to kill her if she screamed again. He threw her to the floor, and she passed out. Michelle came to a few minutes later, and Castro was standing over her. He then went into the bedroom next to this one to look for something. Michelle said the room looked like it had been set up. There were 2 large metal poles set up on either side of the room, with a cable strung between them several feet above the floor. Castro reappeared carrying a stool and 2 large orange electric extension cords. He told her that if she obeyed him, he would let her go. He sat her on the stool and started tying her legs. He also pulled her hands behind her back and tied them together. He then wound the other end of the cord around her neck. He then pulled down his pants and masturbated over her. He told her that he just wanted someone to be there for him and that he needed her. He climaxed, and then he told her to be still. He rolled her over onto her stomach and tied the second orange extension cord around her hands, feet, and neck. He then hoisted her up about a foot off the floor in front of the window. He then stuck a sock in her mouth and wound duct tape around her head. He turned on the radio and left her, saying that he wanted to go get food, and he slammed the door behind him and left. At 6:02 p.m. the next day, Barbara went to the police department to report her daughter as missing. She told officers that Michelle had last been seen the previous morning. She described Michelle as 4 feet 7 inches tall and 160 pounds, with blue eyes, and she should be wearing glasses. The report stated that Michelle has a mental disability and sometimes gets confused with her surroundings. Michelle isn't sure how long she was left suspended in the bedroom. She said that she was dehydrated and hungry. She had also wet herself a few times. Eventually, Castro returned and had a McDonald's Egg McMuffin for her to eat. She screamed and tried to fight him off, but he grabbed her jaw and held her mouth open, ordering her to eat. She refused, and he threw the sandwich on the floor. He untied the extension cord that was attaching her to the poles, and she fell hard on the floor. Her arms and legs were numb, and she screamed and tried to sit up. He called her a slut and told her to lay still. He held her down and untied her arms and ankles, and then he told her to get up. But she was sobbing because she was unable to. Her legs hurt so badly from hanging for so long. So he picked her up and slung her over his shoulder. He then carried her into an adjoining bedroom. He ripped off all of her clothes and attacked her. Over the next hour, he raped her repeatedly while she screamed in pain. She tried to fight him off, but she was just not strong enough. And when he was finally satisfied, they both lay naked on the stained mattress, covered in Michelle's blood. Michelle tried to reason with Castro. She promised that she wouldn't tell anyone what he had done if he let her go. But suddenly, Castro's attitude changed. He began talking to Michelle as if she were his girlfriend. He started talking about being molested back in Puerto Rico when he was like 5, and how upset he was when his wife had left him. He then got up and threw some money at her and told her it was for her services. After telling Michelle to put on her blood and urine-soaked shorts and t-shirt, he dragged her down to the first floor. Her head hit each stair on the way down. He then took her to a heavy wooden door that he used a key to unlock. He dragged her down to the basement and threw her on a pile of dirty clothes. Castro told her that this was where she was going to stay until he felt like he could trust her. He tied her up in chains again and put a motorcycle helmet on her head to muffle her screams. The only thing that gave her the strength to survive was thinking about her son, Joey. After she had been locked up for about a month, Castro took Michelle back upstairs to one of the bedrooms. He had put gray wool sheets over the windows and covered them with barbed wire. He chained her naked to the bed. She said the only way she could tell if it was day or night was from the smells that surrounded her. Castro often fried bacon for himself in the morning for breakfast. Around September, Michelle became pregnant with Ariel Castro's baby. She started recognizing the signs. She was terrified to tell him. One day he noticed that her nipples were leaking, and he asked her if she was pregnant. She told him that she thought she was, and he punched her in the stomach with a barbell. Over the next few weeks, he starved her and beat her, and after about 6 weeks, she had a miscarriage, and then he blamed her for the baby's death. At Christmas, Castro gave her a puppy. She loved the puppy so much. But once when Castro was beating her, the puppy took Michelle's side and tried to protect her, so he broke the puppy's neck and then buried it in the yard. Amanda Berry was on her way home from her job at Burger King on April 21st. It was the day before her 17th birthday. She had clocked out at 7:36 p.m. And as Amanda left the Burger King parking lot, Ariel Castro was passing by in his van. He had his youngest daughter with him at the time, but he dropped his daughter off a few houses down and then did a U-turn and found Amanda again. He stopped and asked her if she wanted a ride home. She was on the phone with her sister Beth, and she rushed her sister off the phone saying that she had a ride. So she hops in his van, and they were talking about his kids, which Amanda knew from school. He passed by her house, and Amanda asked where they were going, and Castro said that he was going to take her to his house to see his daughter Angie. When they got to his house, he took her in the back door and led her upstairs. Amanda said that she noticed a woman laying on a bed in a room. The door was shut, but there was a hole in the door where the door handle should have been. But Ariel told her it was his roommate when she asked. He led her into a bedroom, and Amanda suddenly became nervous. She told Castro he needed to let her go, or he would be in trouble with the police. Castro grabbed her suddenly, and she started screaming. He covered her mouth with his hands, threw her to the floor, and then raped her. When he was finished, he duct taped her arms and legs and put a motorcycle helmet over her head. He carried her down into the basement and chained her around the waist to a pole, and then he left her there. When Amanda didn't arrive home after work, her mother knew something was wrong. Amanda was pretty good about being punctual, and she was really excited because she was having a birthday party the next day. Over the next few hours, Luana Miller, that's Amanda's mom, and Beth, Amanda's sister, called around to all of Amanda's friends to see if anyone had seen or heard from her. On Tuesday morning, Luana went to the police department to report Amanda missing. On Wednesday, Luana and Beth were interviewed at their home. Luana's mom had already printed out flyers, and they were handing them out around the area. They told detectives that it was Amanda's birthday, and that she was supposed to have a party that day. They also said that she had taken no extra clothes with her or her cell phone charger. Amanda had had plans with her boyfriend the night she disappeared as well. She was supposed to get her nails done after work and then call her boyfriend DJ to make plans. DJ said that he had gotten a call from Amanda's cell phone that night around midnight, but his phone battery was almost dead and he couldn't hear anything. But he said he knew it was her because of the caller ID. It showed up her number. On Monday, April 28th, a Cleveland news station ran a story about Amanda's disappearance. Police were completely baffled. Her sister and mother were pleading for her to be returned home safely. Castro was watching the newscast on his TV set at home, and a few minutes after it was done airing, he picked up Amanda's cell phone and called Luana's number. He told her, "I have your daughter. She's healthy and okay." When Luana asked to speak with Amanda, he hung up. But he ended up calling her back just a couple minutes later, and he told her Amanda was going to be his wife. He told her that he wanted to marry Mandy, and that Mandy wanted to be with him. And then he hung up again. Castro had put a TV in Michelle's room where she was staying. She was still there, chained to the bed, and she was able to watch the news coverage of Amanda's disappearance. She said that she knew that this was Castro's way of telling her that a new girl was now in the house. It was weeks before Castro finally brought a young blonde girl into Michelle's room. He introduced the girl as his brother's girlfriend, but Michelle said she recognized her instantly from the news coverage and knew it was Amanda Berry. Michelle was embarrassed for the girl to see her and her living conditions. She said she was naked and filthy. The room had rotting sandwiches and food all over the floor, and it smelled of urine, and Michelle hadn't showered in months. There were flies buzzing around. She noticed that Amanda looked clean and well kept. She was also wearing clothes. Castro led her out of the room, and it was months before the girls saw each other again. Amanda's mom was making sure that her story stayed in the news headlines. She would go to reporters herself to talk to them and get anything she could on the news. The police questioned Amanda's boyfriend as a suspect. They gave him a lie detector test, which he passed. Michelle and Amanda were finally able to actually spend some time together after a while. Castro unlocked Michelle's chains and took her to the bedroom where he had been keeping Amanda Berry. Again, Michelle was embarrassed to go in because she was naked. They hugged each other quickly when Castro left the room for a few moments. Amanda had a chain around her ankle. Castro then came back in and took Michelle back to her room and chained her back up again. Over the first year of Amanda's imprisonment, the two girls only saw each other about a half a dozen times. They were too scared to talk to each other, even when Castro was at work. Amanda would break down occasionally, and Michelle would try to comfort her and tell her that they were going to be okay and that they would eventually get home. Amanda couldn't see how much better Castro was treating her than he was treating Michelle. She got better food, she got to wear clothes, and if she refused Castro's sexual demands, he would come in and rape Michelle instead. Michelle was his punching bag. He always said that he didn't want to make Amanda sad or upset. He would give her everything she asked for, except for freedom. Michelle Knight became pregnant for a third time in August. It took several months for Ariel Castro to make her miscarry this time. He stopped feeding her for several weeks, and he would punch her and jump on her stomach. On August 18th, 2003, Luana held a prayer vigil for her daughter, Amanda. She was on television a lot now, and anytime Michelle saw her on the television, she would turn it up really loud so Amanda could hear her mom's voice. On September 13th, 2003, 11-year-old Shakira Johnson went missing on the east side of Cleveland. She was last seen at a block party. Hundreds of volunteers searched for her over the next few days. On October 20th, Shakira's decomposed body was found in a field near East 71st Street, and a murder investigation was launched. Amanda's mother spoke to the press again 6 months after she had been missing. She talked about how it was getting harder and harder, and how it seemed like Amanda just fell off the face of the earth. She asked that if anyone had any information, to contact the police immediately. Michelle and Ariel Castro were watching this news segment together, and when it finished, Castro laughed. He made fun of Michelle, telling her that at least someone was looking for Amanda, but no one was looking for her because no one cared about her. On November 15th, 2003, America's Most Wanted featured a segment on Amanda Berry. It was said on the show that the mysterious telephone calls that Luana had received had come from Amanda's kidnapper. On November 20th, 2003, Michelle Knight was removed from the National Database of Missing Persons. A Cleveland police spokesperson later explained that she had been removed 15 months after she had went missing because they had been unable to contact Barbara Knight to establish whether or not she had ever been found. On Christmas Day, Amanda sat in the bedroom at 2207 Seymour Avenue, watching the news. Her mother was being interviewed about her first holiday without her daughter. Luana had said it was going to be a lonely Christmas without Amanda. Then Amanda's grandmother spoke, asking for anyone with information on her to come forward. On July 11th, 2004, Ariel Castro's father died. Ariel was left around $11,000 and a 1997 Chevy Malibu. 2 weeks later, Cleveland police came to 2207 Seymour Avenue to investigate Ariel Castro for abduction and child endangerment. That morning, while he had been driving the school bus, he picked up 2 elementary school children that had to go to different schools. After dropping off one of the children, he then went to a local Wendy's for lunch. He ordered the remaining child, who was a 4-year-old boy, to the back of his bus, saying, "Lay down, bitch." He then locked the bus and went inside to eat his lunch. When he was finished, he drove around for a while and then finally dropped the boy off at the elementary school 2 hours after picking him up. The mother of the boy called the police, and the police came to question him, but he didn't answer the knocks, so they left, and they never bothered him again about that. He did eventually get suspended for work for 60 days without pay for that incident, though. At the end of February 2004, the body of a young girl was found near the Mexican border. The body bore similarities to Amanda Berry, and tests were conducted to verify if it was Amanda or not. 2 days later, though, Amanda's mom was informed that it was not Amanda's body. In late March, Ariel Castro came into Michelle Knight's room and unchained her. He told her that a new girl would soon be arriving, and she needed to help him prepare another room. Gina DeJesus was best friends with Arlene Castro. Gina was 14 and in the 7th grade. She was taking special education classes and still learning to read. On April 2nd, Gina and Arlene were walking together. They were going to go to Gina's house for a few hours to play after school, but Arlene needed to call her mom first to get permission. Gina gave Arlene 50 cents to use the payphone, but her mom said no because Arlene was grounded. Now, Gina would have normally taken the bus home, but since she had given Arlene that 50 cents, she now didn't have enough money, so she said she would just walk home. So she started walking home and she was spotted by Ariel Castro. He pulled up beside her and asked her if she knew where Arlene was. And Gina said that they had just parted ways, so Castro asked if she would help him find Arlene. She said she could, and she got into his Jeep. When she was in the Jeep, he asked Gina if she could help him move a speaker at his house, and Gina agreed to help. He pulled up to the house at 2207 Seymour Avenue. He led Gina in through the back door and then took her upstairs and pulled her into the bathroom. He was checking himself out in the mirror, and then he asked Gina to show him her privates. Gina started feeling really uncomfortable, and she told him she wanted to leave. Castro said she could, but they would have to go out a different door. He tricked her into going down in the basement, where he attacked her. He put plastic ties on her wrists and tied her to a pole, and then raped her. Gina screamed and tried to fight him off, and when he finished, he put a motorcycle helmet over her head and left her there. Michelle could hear Gina screaming, and she prayed. She could hear crashes and someone screaming, "Get off of me." Gina's mother, Nancy, started to worry around 3:45 p.m. It was 10 minutes later than Gina would have normally been home. So her mom walked down to the corner store to see if anyone had seen her there, but everyone said that they hadn't seen her. At 5:09 p.m., Nancy called the police to report Gina missing. The police report read, "Missing juvenile. Went to school and never returned home. Last seen by school, Wilbur Wright, after school let out." Nancy explained that her daughter was normal and healthy, but had the mental capacity of a 9 or 10-year-old. She gave officers a photograph of Gina, and detectives called around to all the Cleveland hospitals and the morgue, but there was no sign of her. Arlene Castro was also interviewed by detectives, and she said that she had last seen Gina when they split up at the payphone, and Gina said she was walking home. Arlene was the last person to see her. Police blanketed the west side of Cleveland and also used dogs to try to pick up her scent. And a dog actually picked up her scent at that payphone, but they were only able to track it for a short distance, and they lost the trail. Around midday, Amanda Berry's boyfriend, Denizo Diaz, who she called DJ, went to leave his house and found that it was surrounded by police. He was escorted to a squad car for questioning. A few hours later, Diaz was released. He was stopped and questioned periodically over the next few years about Amanda and Gina. Gina's family and friends posted flyers with her photograph all over the west side. Ariel Castro actually helped pass out those flyers. There was even a flyer posted on the pole outside of the residence of 2207 Seymour Avenue. On Sunday, the FBI joined in the search for Gina. Her bedroom was searched and her parents were questioned, and Gina's mom actually gave her first interview that afternoon. Now, Ariel Castro began to grow really paranoid after he kidnapped Gina. He was convinced that a security camera at the school may have caught a glimpse of him before he snatched Gina. So he writes out this confession letter, and he blamed himself for being a sexual predator, but he blamed the 3 victims for being responsible for their own kidnappings. In the letter, he also talked about how he was molested and raped when he was a young boy, and how he had been obsessed with sex from an early age because of that. He also claimed that his marriage was abusive. He said that she would push him and hit him until he would eventually hit her back. And he said that they were married for 12 years. He talked about meeting Michelle and giving her a ride home, and that she had been there ever since, about 2 years at the time. He also talked about picking up Amanda Berry, and that she had been there now for about a year. And he said that both girls accepted money for sex. He also claims that he treated them well and that they ate well. He said he didn't know why he kept looking for more women in the streets when he already had 2 at home. He wrote about meeting Gina and giving her a ride and then inviting her over. He did say that the 3 women were held against their will, but it was because they each made a mistake. To the parents, he wrote that he was very sorry and that he is sick. He said that he was diagnosed with a cyst in his brain, and he didn't know if that was what was making him do the things he had done. He said that he felt really bad because of the age of Gina. He also claimed that he molested her, but he didn't rape her. And he said that he didn't know at the time that she was the daughter of someone that he knew and considered a friend, which was Gina's dad. He said that his intentions were to let the women go after he arranged everything, and his family knew what to do once he took his life. He talked about having a bank account with thousands of dollars in it, along with cash that was hidden under the washing machine, which was several $1,000s. He said that he wanted all the money to go to the 3 victims. He mentioned to his children in the letter not to get into a car with someone just because you think you know them. He said that this was the case for Amanda and Gina. When he was finished with the letter, he folded it and put it in a drawer in his kitchen, and it stayed there for the next 9 years. At a city council meeting, the subject of Amanda and Gina's disappearances was brought up. The councilmen talked about how there were 3 abductions in recent months, and people needed to be concerned. They agreed to work on a plan to make the area safer for the children. The FBI were now in on Gina's disappearance, and a reward was offered for information leading to her being found. Ariel Castro went to Gina's parents' house to console her mother, Nancy. He left with a handful of flyers to pass out. Side note, what kind of psycho does that? The mayor of Cleveland came to the DeJesus house to console Gina's parents as well. There was a shrine for Gina out on the front lawn. The mayor joined them at a news conference and spoke on behalf of the family. Michelle was following the search closely on the news. She had recognized Gina as the little sister of one of her classmates. The police rounded up all registered sex offenders on the west side to question them about the recent disappearance of Gina. There were 7 arrests on other charges, but no leads as to Gina's whereabouts. Police combed through wastelands and parks looking for clues. And Ariel Castro joined in the search for Gina. He handed out flyers and even attended a candlelight vigil honoring Gina for her 15th birthday. An anonymous tip, believed now to have come from Ariel Castro, led police to pick up Fernando Colon for questioning. He was questioned and underwent a polygraph test, which he passed. Colon did tell them, at the time, to take a closer look at Ariel Castro, because he knew Gina and her parents, and where they lived. But the police never followed up on his tip. Years later, the FBI denied ever getting a tip regarding Ariel Castro. Michelle met Gina a couple of weeks after she arrived at the house. Castro had left them in the bathroom with each other for a couple of minutes, and Michelle told her that she knew who she was, but not to let Castro know that they knew each other. One night, Castro brought Michelle downstairs and offered her some shots of rum. He took some shots himself and then started to tell Michelle that he didn't mean to kidnap Gina and that he thought she was someone else, that it was an accident to kidnap his daughter's best friend. April 21st, 2004 marked the 1-year anniversary of Amanda Berry's disappearance. Her mother was not doing well. She had nightmares about Amanda being sold as a sex slave or drugged out or dead in a ditch somewhere. She was afraid to leave home. She didn't want to miss a call. And all the sleepless nights had taken their toll on Luana. Luana felt like no one seemed to care about Amanda until Gina went missing a few weeks earlier. Felix and Nancy, these are Gina's parents, and Luana Miller, who is Amanda's mom, became very close. And they all worked on a common mission of finding their missing children. On June 1st, 2004, a $20,000 reward was offered for any information leading to the discovery of Amanda Berry or Gina DeJesus. Ariel Castro Jr. wrote an article about Gina's disappearance and how it had changed the area. He interviewed Gina's mother along with other parents in the area, and his article noted that everyone in the neighborhood felt connected to the DeJesus family and that they had come together for this single cause. Around this time, Castro had brought Gina into the pink bedroom with Michelle. He had removed the small bucket that Michelle had been using as a toilet and replaced it with a larger portable toilet. He ordered Gina onto the bed with Michelle, and then he shackled Michelle's neck to Gina's ankle. Gina asked how they were supposed to use the bathroom like that, so he ended up changing it and shackling their ankles together. He left Michelle some sweatpants and a t-shirt to change into, as she was still naked. Michelle and Gina continued to share a room, and they continued to stay chained together. They shared a bed and one filthy plastic portable toilet. They were able to watch TV. It was the only window to the outside world that they had. Ariel Castro gave all 3 girls spiral notebooks so they could keep journals or draw pictures. Michelle said that she had written hers every day. And Amanda used her journals to track time, and she also tracked the instances of assault. The journals were extremely detailed. They described their relationships with each other and with Ariel Castro. Most nights, Castro would go to the pink bedroom to rape either Michelle or Gina, while they gripped one another's hand for comfort. He would also beat them up in front of each other. He always beat Michelle harder, and sometimes Michelle would actually intervene, and she'd end up taking Gina's beating. Castro started referring to Amanda as his wife, saying that they were now married, and he started taking Michelle and Gina out into the backyard. The backyard was littered with barbed wire, plastic tarps, and chains. They were strung out everywhere, but this is where he would now rape them. Michelle and Gina started to wonder if he was trying to hide from Amanda that he was still having sex with both of them. Castro settled into a daily routine. Every morning he would lock all of the bedroom doors and then leave out the back door to get to his school bus. He then drove to the Burger King, the one where he had snatched Amanda Berry from. That's where he had his morning coffee. He would then park his bus outside his house. Around 9:30 in the morning, he'd leave the bus running and carry in large bags of McDonald's food and drinks. On November 17th, 2004, Luana Miller appeared on the Montel Williams show. She was there to ask TV psychic Sylvia Brown what had happened to Amanda. Luana had first seen Brown on the show a year earlier, and she was convinced that Sylvia Brown could help her. After asking several questions about her daughter, Sylvia told Luana that she saw Amanda's black hooded jacket in a dumpster, and then it had DNA on it. Luana then told her that it was believed that Amanda got into a car that had 3 other people inside it. Brown told her that it wasn't 3 people, it was only 1 person, and she mentioned a Cuban-looking man, short with a kind of stocky build. Luana asked Sylvia if she could tell her if they would ever find Amanda, and Sylvia said, "She's not alive, honey." Sylvia also mentioned something about her being in water. Luana asked if there was any way that the case would ever be solved, and Sylvia told her it wasn't like Amanda to go off and not check in with her, and she had wished that they did find that black jacket because of the DNA. She did say that she thought the case would be solved, especially if they looked for that Cuban man that she had mentioned earlier. After this, Luana lost all hope that Amanda would ever be found. She went home and cleaned out her daughter's bedroom. She took down her pictures, and she gave away Amanda's computer. She told friends that she was now 98% sure that Amanda was dead. Michelle said that she felt like they were frozen in time. She said it felt like the only thing that was moving was the outside world, and they were all trapped in time in the house on Seymour Avenue. In early July, Emily Castro, now 17, found out she was pregnant. She was fearful of what her father might think, so she and her boyfriend, D'Angelo Gonzalez, the baby's dad, relocated to Fort Wayne, Indiana. They moved in with Emily's older sister, Angie. Also during this time, there was an ongoing investigation into allegations of child molestation on Milda's husband, Fernando Colon. Castro had brainwashed Emily and Arlene to go to the police, claiming that Colon had sexually abused them. Colon took a lie detector test, which he passed. He was eventually arrested, though, and charged with 28 counts of rape, kidnapping, and sexual offenses. On several occasions, Emily and Arlene tried to recant their statements, saying that they didn't want to testify in court. But Castro would not let them back out of it. He even drove all the way to Fort Wayne, Indiana to pick up Emily so she could testify in court. Colon did end up going to trial, and he was eventually cleared of all but 4 charges. He was sentenced to 5 years community service and had to register as a sex offender. Ariel Castro brought the 3 hostages outside in brown wigs and sunglasses. He walked them out the back door and to the garage, where he locked them in a van for 3 days. That was while his daughter stayed at his house during this trial. In late October, Gina DeJesus' parents appeared on Maury Povich. They pleaded with the audience and cameras for anyone who had information regarding Gina's disappearance to come forward. Maury introduced them to a psychic from Long Island named Jeffrey Wands. He told them he believed that Gina's kidnapper was a sexual predator who she had spoken to many times. He told them that their daughter was still alive, and the abductor knew the area from which she was taken very well. He described him as a black man with facial hair in his late 20s to early 30s, around 5 foot 9 inches tall. That Christmas, Luana Miller was hospitalized for health issues, and 2 months later, on March 2nd, she died of heart failure. Friends claim that after speaking to Sylvia Brown, she was never the same again, and they believe she died from a broken heart. That afternoon, Michelle and Gina learned of her death on the evening news. A few hours later, Castro unlocked Michelle and Gina's chains and let them walk around the 2nd floor. Michelle approached Amanda and told her that she was sorry to hear about her mother. But Amanda looked at her like she didn't know what she was talking about, and Michelle realized that Amanda didn't know about her mom's death yet. So Michelle broke the sad news of her mother passing, and Amanda broke down and cried. Emily Castro gave birth to a little girl named Janilla. She was still living in Fort Wayne, Indiana with her boyfriend D'Angelo and her mother and sister, Arlene. Emily and D'Angelo fought often, and Emily often accused him of having affairs. Around the same time of Janilla's birth, Amanda Berry became pregnant with Ariel Castro's baby. Amanda started having signs of morning sickness. During her pregnancy, Castro kept Amanda away from Michelle and Gina. Michelle couldn't help but think of the son that she was ripped away from, and the other babies which Castro had forced her into miscarrying. Castro's behavior towards Michelle became worse at this time. He started feeding her only once a day, and it was always stale leftovers, and she was only able to shower once a week. She was often used as Castro's punching bag. Amanda was always treated far better than the other two prisoners. She was fed better food, she was given better clothes, and it set her apart from the others in the house. The girls started to wonder, and it may not be until later, but they started to wonder if he was trying to pin them against each other, basically. Several weeks later, Angie and Emily arrived at Castro's house to search. Michelle believed that they were becoming suspicious. Shortly before the girls arrived, though, Castro marched all three of them down to the basement and chained them to the pole. He told them that if any of them made a sound while his family was there, he would shoot them. The three girls could hear his family upstairs, but they were all terrified to make any noise. Castro's daughters left, and he came down to the basement and fed them all. But the girls remained chained in the basement over the next 3 weeks. While they were there, they exchanged stories about how they were kidnapped and the different types of abuse they had all suffered. Amanda was mostly quiet during this time. She mostly just agreed that she too had suffered the same type of abuse. Finally, Castro brought them back upstairs, putting Amanda back in her bedroom by herself, and Michelle and Gina together again in the pink bedroom. On September 21st, Cleveland police arrested 2 men on the suspicion of aggravated murder of Gina DeJesus. They had received an anonymous tip that the girl was buried beneath a concrete garage floor. Gina's parents were briefed, and then the agents began searching the house and garage. There were reporters and helicopters flying above. A backhoe was brought in to start digging up the freshly poured concrete. A cadaver dog was brought in as well. There was supposedly a dungeon found in the home, and then the dog had alerted to the smell of a dead body. But the search provided nothing, and the police later announced that same night that it was all a false alarm. The 2 suspects were released the very next day. In December, Amanda Berry was in the final stages of her 3rd trimester, and Michelle became pregnant for a 4th time. Michelle told Gina that she was pregnant and that she was terrified of what Castro would do to her when he found out. He ended up starving her for 3 weeks and forced her to drink soda, which made her sick. Finally, Castro got tired of waiting, and he kicked and punched her in the stomach until she was forced again to miscarry. On Christmas Day, Amanda Berry went into labor. Castro brought her down into the basement to give birth. He ordered Michelle, who was still recovering from losing her own baby, to the basement as well, to deliver Amanda's baby. He had bought a black plastic, child swimming pool for Amanda to give birth in, so there would be no mess. Down in the basement, Castro and Michelle sat on either side of Amanda as the baby started to come. Suddenly, Amanda pushed, and the baby's head became stuck, and it started turning blue. Michelle had no medical training, but she told Amanda to stop pushing because the baby couldn't breathe. Amanda said that she couldn't help it, so Michelle told Amanda that they needed to get the baby out now, and she offered out her hands to Amanda, telling her to squeeze them and push as hard as she could. So Amanda did, and the baby came out, but it wasn't breathing. Castro started yelling at Michelle, telling her it was her fault, and that if she didn't fix the baby, or if the baby died, that he would kill her. So Michelle laid the baby flat on its back, and she lifted its head up. she started breathing into the baby's mouth and doing compressions with 2 fingers. Finally, the baby started screaming. It was a girl. Castro named her Jocelyn. He also kept the placenta in his refrigerator as a memento. After Jocelyn was born, Castro took off Amanda's chains. He didn't want the baby to ever have to see them. The baby moved into Amanda's bedroom and she took care of it. Ariel Castro saw the 3 hostages and the baby as his family now. And the new baby did raise everyone's spirits. It would be another 2 years before he would remove the chains from Michelle and Gina, though. 3 months after Jocelyn was born, on April 4th, 2007, 19-year-old Emily Castro repeatedly slashed her 11-month-old baby's throat with a knife. Emily had stopped taking her manic depression medicine and became delusional. She believed that her boyfriend had been sleeping with her 2 sisters and her mother, and that they all planned to kill her and take her baby. The day before, D'Angelo had moved out of their apartment, and he left the baby behind with Emily. Around 6:30 p.m. the next evening, she took the baby out to the garage, and she slashed the baby's throat 4 times with a sharp knife. She then carried her back into the house covered in blood and struggling to breathe. Nilda grabbed her granddaughter out of Emily's arms and ran out into the street screaming for help. Emily tried to kill herself when they left. She used the same knife and slashed her wrists and stabbed her neck. She then went outside to a creek behind her home and tried to drown herself. Emily was arrested for attempted murder and battery. She and her daughter were both taken to the hospital for treatment. Emily told detectives that she had been hearing voices and that they told her D'Angelo was cheating on her with her sister and her mom. She said that they were going to kill her and take her daughter. And she said that if she was going to be murdered, she wanted to take her daughter with her. On April 22nd, Amanda Berry celebrated her 21st birthday, 1 day after the 4th anniversary of her abduction. A prayer vigil was organized at the Burger King, and a website was put up for Amanda. It was www.amandaberry.net. On July 9th, 14-year-old Ashley Summers went missing. She looked a lot like Amanda Berry, and she was taken in the same area. Authorities thought the missing girl may somehow be tied to Amanda and Gina's disappearances. On January 15th, 2008, Emily Castro went on trial for the attempted murder of her daughter. She waived her right to a jury trial. She was pleading an insanity defense, but was found competent enough to stand trial. A psychologist testified that Emily was sane and that she had exaggerated symptoms of mental illness when he had examined her. He did acknowledge that she suffered from manic depressive disorder, but that would not stop her from knowing the difference between right and wrong. She was convicted of attempted murder, as the judge said that mental illness does not equal insanity. She was sentenced a month later to serve 30 years in prison, 5 years suspended as probation, and she was ordered to seek mental health treatment as part of her probation. As Jocelyn grew into a toddler and began to talk, Castro gave the 3 captives aliases. He ordered them to never use their real names again, in case his daughter ever recognized any of them from TV or something. He called Michelle Juju, and Gina became known as Chelsea. It appeared that Amanda got to go by her real name. He soon removed their chains because Jocelyn began to pull on them and asking questions. After work each evening, Castro would bring them all into the kitchen. Michelle would hold and rock Jocelyn to keep her calm. Gina would cook dinner, and Castro would talk to Amanda about his day, as if she were his wife. Occasionally, they would all go to the living room and watch Castro's favorite show, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. During the long days, Michelle and Gina could hear Amanda playing with her daughter in the nearby bedroom. They made homemade baby clothes for the little girl out of old dirty t-shirts. After years of intense emotional and physical abuse from Castro, all three women were developing Stockholm Syndrome. As the days, weeks, months, and years passed, the three captives did whatever they had to do to survive. After Jocelyn's birth, they became a sort of family, with Castro as the father figure, telling them all to respect their elders. Michel said in his own demented mind, he loved all of them because he thought they were family. Michelle was the only one in the house that would stand up to Ariel. She would suffer the consequences. He would spit in her face, punch her, and try to humiliate her in front of the other girls and belittle her, telling her that no one liked her and that's why no one was ever looking for her. On April 3rd, Castro pulled a U-turn while he was driving the school bus, and he was reported to the school board. He was suspended for 60 days unpaid. During his suspension, he drove to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to visit his son and two daughters. In late August of 2009, J.C. Lee Dugard suddenly reappeared 18 years after she had gone missing. She had been held captive by a man and his wife since 1991, when she was 11. She was raped and abused, and had two daughters that were fathered by her captor. In October, Oprah Winfrey devoted a show to the missing children from Cleveland. She concentrated on Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Ashley Summers. JC's story had given them hope that their daughters might too be alive and come home one day.
We're on Cleveland's west side. 3 girls have disappeared from the area, within blocks of one another.
My name is Beth Serrano. My sister Amanda Berry went missing April 21st, 2003. She would be 23 years old today.
Amanda Berry. She left work about 7:30 at night. She was working at the Burger King, got done with her shift, and began walking away from work. That's the last time she was seen.
What's been the hardest for me is that Amanda's just been gone for too long, and I want her home.
My name is Nancy Ruiz. My daughter Gina DeJesus went missing April 2nd, 2004. She would be 19 years old today.
1 year after the disappearance of Amanda Berry, just down the street, Gina DeJesus and a friend of hers walked from school on their way home. They came to this payphone where they made a telephone call. After the telephone call, Gina started walking toward her residence approximately 1 mile away. That's the last time Gina DeJesus was seen.
So not knowing is what's tearing us apart. But I fight. I'm never going to give up.
My name is Jennifer Summers. My daughter Ashley went missing on July 6th of 2007. She would be 16 years old today.
This happened within a half a mile of this other area where Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus disappeared from. Ashley left her residence voluntarily, and there's been no legitimate sighting of Ashley since she left her house.
JC's story gives me hope because it makes me believe Ashley will come home.
October 31st, 2009, Anthony Sowell was arrested after he was reported for rape. Officers arrived at his home on October 29th with an arrest and search warrant, but Sowell was not there. They did, however, find 2 bodies on the floor in the living room. He was later found and arrested after 2 days. 4 more bodies were found in the home, buried in a shallow grave in the basement and hidden in the crawl space of the house. Then the remains of 3 more bodies and part of a 4th were found when digging up the backyard, and a woman's skull was found in a bucket, bringing the total to 11. Over the next few weeks, cold case detectives pored over case files looking for missing persons, including Gina DeJesus and Amanda Berry. But the 2 girls' bodies were not found among the bodies at the Sowell home. In November, Anita Legault heard a pounding sound coming from her neighbor Ariel Castro's house. She looked up to see a woman and a baby at a window. The window was half boarded up. She immediately called police. They came to the house and knocked on the door for several minutes, but no one answered, so they left. Michelle later said that it was her at the window and that she was trying to get out. Soon afterward, another neighbor, Juan Perez, was in his basement with his sister when they heard screaming coming from Ariel Castro's basement, and they called the police. Perez said it was the kind of scream that made you uncomfortable, and that he thought the house was vacant because the windows were boarded up and he rarely saw Castro there. Once again, the police came out to the house, and once again they left after no one answered the door. Jocelyn, now 4 years old, was pretty and pampered by everyone in the house. Castro would often take her to the park and tell everyone that she was his girlfriend's daughter. He also reportedly often took her to visit his mother. He visited his cousin once, bringing Jocelyn along, and introduced her as his granddaughter. She looked healthy and happy, according to the cousin. Amanda homeschooled her daughter during the days while Castro was at work driving the school bus. And when he came home from work, Michelle could hear him unlock Amanda's door, and he would take Jocelyn downstairs to play and watch cartoons. Over the years, all three women adapted to their situation. They did whatever they could to keep Castro happy. He ordered Michelle not to call Jocelyn by her real name, so Michelle called her Pretty. Michelle and Gina were close, like sisters, and Amanda was completely devoted to her daughter and keeping her safe from Ariel Castro. April 21st, 2011, 8 years since Amanda Berry had been tricked into going into the house at Seymour Avenue, Castro made her watch the annual vigil that took place at the Burger King in her honor on TV. On February 14th, 2012, the school district discovered that Ariel Castro had been going grocery shopping every day, out of the way of his route. A disciplinary hearing was held, and he was suspended for another 60 days without pay. This time he was made to sign a last chance contract. It basically stated that if he got in trouble again, he understood that he would be fired. Every year on the anniversary of Gina's disappearance and Amanda's disappearance, their families held a vigil to honor them. Nancy Ruiz, Gina's mom, held hands with Beth, Amanda's sister, on the 9th anniversary of Amanda's disappearance. Amanda was watching the coverage with Ariel Castro, just 3 miles away. Charles Ramsey moved to Seymour Avenue, 2 houses down from Castro. They soon became friends and started hanging out together. The prosecutor of Cuyahoga County, Bill Mason, received a letter from Robert Walford, an inmate at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. He claimed that he had murdered Amanda Berry with another man and buried her remains. Cuyahoga sheriff deputies drove Walford to the spot where he claimed that Amanda Berry was buried. He pointed out an area and digging commenced, but nothing was found. Beth Serrano, Amanda's sister, waited for the news at the DeJesus house. On one hand, she didn't want Amanda's body to be found, but she also ached for closure. She didn't get it that day. Michelle and Gina started getting bitten by bedbugs that summer. The mattress that they slept on had originally been found in an alley by Castro, and Castro's first reaction was to close the door to Amanda's room so she and his daughter didn't get bedbugs as well. Castro brought in a plastic sheet and covered the mattress with it, but it did nothing to get rid of the bedbugs. The girls spent the entire summer sweltering in the heat with no air conditioning and getting eaten alive by bedbugs. In September, Michelle became pregnant for the 5th time by Castro. Soon afterward, Castro took Jocelyn to a carnival, and they had brought back hot dogs smothered in mustard. Michelle was allergic to mustard, and she refused to eat the hot dog. She had had an allergic reaction before, and her mom had to rush her to the emergency room. He threw the hot dog on the bed and pulled out a gun and made her eat it. Michelle writhed in pain all night. It was hard for her to breathe, and her throat was swollen. Castro brought her a bottle of cough syrup the next day, and she was miserable. All throughout her sickness, Gina nurtured her and took care of her. But Michelle begged Gina just to end her life, to smother her with a pillow. But Gina refused and urged her to stay strong and fight. September 20th, Castro parked his school bus outside of Scranton School and went home. The principal became worried as the bus was blocking emergency entrances for fire trucks. Castro returned 4 hours later. He was ordered to appear at a disciplinary hearing again. He knew that he faced getting fired for this incident. Cleveland School District Superintendent said that his excuses were not valid and he was recommending termination. And Ariel Castro was fired after nearly 22 years of service, effective immediately. He later claimed that he had tried to get fired on purpose because he had a demanding home life. After losing his job, Castro became depressed. Amanda asked him if he had lost his job because they started to notice that he wasn't leaving in the mornings for his early route. He started abusing Michelle at all hours of the day and night, and he started taking Jocelyn with him outside of the house more often. On Christmas Day, Jocelyn's 6th birthday, Ariel Castro threw Jocelyn a party. He had balloons and streamers, and Gina and Amanda were allowed to come down. But Michelle, who was now 3 months pregnant, was left out of everything. After the party, Castro sent Amanda, Gina, and Jocelyn back to their rooms. He then ordered Michelle to the basement. He pushed her down the basement stairs, and she landed on her stomach on top of a bookcase. He then kicked her over and over again in the stomach with his heavy boot. Then he dragged her up the stairs and left her in her room. 4 days later, she started to bleed, and she miscarried another baby. On February 18th, 2013, Ariel Castro signed up for Facebook. He posted a 20-year-old picture of himself as his profile picture, and he was searching for gigs with a band because he was a bass player, and his previous band had just fired him. On April 2nd, the 9th anniversary of Gina's disappearance, her family threw a fundraiser to try to keep her case known. Arlene Castro gave birth to a baby boy on April 11th, and Castro announced his new grandson to his friends on Facebook, making him a grandfather 5 times over. On April 21st, Castro celebrated the 10th anniversary of Amanda's abduction with birthday cake. As Amanda watched coverage of her 10th vigil, Castro mingled with the crowd at the vigil that was gathered outside of the Burger King where Amanda used to work. On May 6th, Ariel poked his head in the door of Michelle and Gina's bedroom to tell them he was going to his mother's. He hadn't locked Amanda's bedroom door, and she only noticed because Jocelyn came running into her room saying that Daddy was gone, and he told her to come upstairs and stay there. Now, he had always locked the doors before he left, so Amanda carefully opened it. At first, she thought it might be a trick, because he had been known for trying to trap them in different ways, seeing if they would escape the house. So she quietly went downstairs. She tried the front door, and it was unlocked, but the screen door was bolted shut. She noticed that there were neighbors on the porch across the street, so she started beating on the door and yelling. She reached her hand through, there was like a gap, I guess, between the wood that he had boarding up the door and the actual door. So she reached her hand through and she was trying to get someone's attention, which she finally did, and they came over to the porch. A man approached and told her to try to break the glass, but it was so thick it wouldn't break. And then another man approached. This was Charles Ramsey. He told her to kick the panel of the door at the bottom, as it was the thinnest part. and then he started kicking it from the outside. After a few kicks, the frame started to bend, and Amanda was able to crawl out. She reached back in and grabbed Jocelyn. Jocelyn was screaming for her daddy, and Amanda ran across the street begging for a phone. She dialed 911 and said, "Help me, I'm Amanda Berry." The 911 operator asked her if she needed police, fire, or ambulance. Amanda said she needed police. The operator asked her what was going on there, and Amanda said, "I've been kidnapped. I've been missing 10 years. I'm here. I'm free now." The operator then asked about her, and she begged them to hurry before he came back. Charles Ramsey was also on the phone across the street with a dispatcher. And at 5:45 p.m., Cleveland police officers drove up to 2207 Seymour Avenue. 2 minutes earlier, they had received a call from a woman claiming to be Amanda Berry. Amanda ran over to the police car as they were approaching, and the police instantly recognized her. Amanda pointed across the street and told them that Ariel Castro had imprisoned her there for 10 years. The police asked if anyone else was in there, and Amanda said yes, Gina DeJesus and Michelle Knight. The two officers called it in to the 2nd District Station, and then they dashed across Seymour Avenue. At 5:57 p.m., another officer arrived to assist them. The officers drew their firearms and proceeded cautiously, as they were unaware if the kidnappers were still in the house. Michelle and Gina were scared. They didn't know what was going on. They had heard all the banging downstairs, but had no clue what was going on. They didn't know if someone had broken in or, what was happening. Two of the officers went into the basement with their guns drawn, and the other two went up to the 2nd floor. And although it was bright outside, it was pitch black in the house. When they got to the top of the steps, there was a heavy curtain. They announced themselves, "Cleveland Police." Michelle tiptoed to the door and peeked out. Again, she didn't know if it was really police or if it was an intruder. She said anybody could say that they were the police. But a few seconds later, an officer opened the door to the bedroom and asked if anyone was in there. Michelle could see his badge in the flashlight, and she ran and jumped into his arms. Officers continued to search the house, while Amanda and Jocelyn were in the back of an ambulance. Amanda warned the officers that Castro would probably be back at any time, so they put an APB out for Castro, and a few minutes later, he was spotted in his car, and they pulled him over. He had pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. Ariel's brother, O'Neill, was with them, and the Castro brothers were separated, read their rights, and both handcuffed. O'Neill didn't know what was going on, and he said that if there was a problem, that they should probably ask his brother, Pedro, about it, but that Pedro was passed out drunk at their mom's house. They were then taken to police headquarters, and the police also went to Castro's mother's house and arrested Pedro. They were all three photographed, fingerprinted, and processed. The officer said that Michelle jumped into his arms and would not let go. They asked Michelle if there was anyone else in the house, and she said there was. And they said Gina, kind of shyly peeked her head out. And they didn't really recognize her at first because she was so thin and had her hair chopped off short. They hadn't even heard her time recognizing Michelle because they didn't have a missing persons poster to compare her to. But the officer claimed that they thought Michelle was a child at first because she was so small and frail.
I have Michelle in my arms, and then you got Gina coming out. And it was like one bombshell after another. That's when I broadcasted. 2 out of 23. We found them.
New video shows the raw emotions of the officers who were first on the scene and found Amanda, Gina, and Michelle.
Paul Kiska is live on 5 on Seymour Avenue. And Paul, this video is hard to watch without getting emotional.
You know, not only that, it is a very rare look inside a police interview room. These police officers being interviewed 5 days after the dramatic rescue here on Seymour Avenue, and yet their emotions still right there, so strong.
We pull up, we see a crowd like on the porch. We see this girl, she's like raising her hand, holding a child. I'm looking at my partner, you know, is it her? So she came to the driver's side and he looked at me and he's like, it's her. Just the emotion from that point of him confirming it was Amanda, it was overwhelming. My partner immediately asked her, you know, is there anybody else inside? And she said, yes, Gina DeJesus and another girl. And it was like another bombshell, just with overwhelming force just hitting me. As we were going up the steps, it was so quiet, like peaceful, almost as if, you know, I started thinking, okay, all we're gonna do is clear this top floor, nobody's gonna be there, and just leave. And then you hear this scuffling, you know, something going on in this room. And it was Michelle. She kind of popped out into the doorway and paused there for a second. Within moments, she came charging at me. She jumped onto me. She's like, you saved us, you saved us. And I'm holding on to her so tight.
When he put her down, she jumped up into my arms and held on to me and screamed, please don't let me go, please don't let me go. I said, honey, don't worry, I'm not letting you go.
And then within a few seconds, I see another girl come out of the bedroom. I just look at her. You can immediately tell who it is, just thinner. And again, I just needed confirmation. And I asked her, what's your name? She said, my name is Gina DeJesus. It's very overwhelming. I mean, it took everything to hold myself together. You know, I have Michelle in my arms, and then you got Gina coming out. And it was like one bombshell after another. That's when I broadcasted, you know, 2 out of 23, we found them. We found them.
And he looked at me. The look on his face, and he was, Barb. We found them. I can't even tell you how the emotions that we felt. It was just unbelievable. And everything else was just a blur. The heaviness in the heart just lifted. And then the next array of emotions of, I don't know, it was relief, and then you just don't want to think of what happened to them, so you just keep thinking positive and wanting to just encourage them that they're safe now and everything is okay.
The description of the suspect and the vehicle, they were able to locate him at 32nd and Clark at McDonald's. It was a team effort though, not just for us. We just responded there. It was a great team effort from everybody that was involved.
The girls are the heroes in this story. They fought every day, and they're the true heroes.
Michelle and Gina were led out of the house with blankets over their heads and taken directly to the ambulance. All 3 girls told their stories while in the back of that ambulance. FBI agents showed up then and began coordinating the investigation. They not only had to deal with the investigation, but also getting the women reunited with their families. The women all needed basic necessities like clothes and shoes, and they all needed to find somewhere for them to stay, as they knew once the story broke that the girls had all been found, it was going to be chaotic. The women were all then rushed into the emergency room to be examined. All 3 were emotionally distraught, but glad that they were free. They all told the doctor how they'd been held against their will and raped repeatedly over the years. Michelle also told about her pregnancies and the forceful miscarriages. Michelle only weighed 84 pounds, and she was in way worse shape than the other two women. All three women were given rape kit examinations, with the exception of Jocelyn. DNA swabs were also taken from Amanda and Jocelyn so that they could compare DNA to Ariel Castro. Doctors found that Michelle's jaw was badly injured, thanks to the punches that she had received over time from Castro. She had also suffered nerve damage in both of her arms from all of the beatings, and she had a life-threatening bacterial infection from the years of rotten food and starvation. Her first meal in the hospital was a steak and shake cheeseburger and fries, and a cheesecake blizzard, which she later described as going to heaven. Officer Barbara Johnson remained with the three victims all the time. She would even go to the bathroom with them and wait outside, so they were never alone. Amanda had Jocelyn, so she seemed a little more grounded. She was busy trying to protect her daughter and make it seem like everything was okay. Michelle was frightened, and she held herself a lot, and Gina just kind of seemed confused by it all. Around 7 p.m., Nancy Ruiz heard a rumor that her daughter Gina had been found alive in Ariel Castro's house, along with Amanda Berry and Michelle Knight. She rushed straight over to Seymour Avenue and straight up to the Deputy Chief of Homeland Security, Ed Tomba, and she asked him if it was true. He had been working on Gina and Amanda's cases since the beginning, and Tomba said it was a mob scene, and Nancy just kept screaming, "Is it true? Is it true?" He said that he didn't know, but he took her up to the house. An FBI agent showed her a photograph of one of the girls that had been rescued, and she was able to identify her as Gina. At 7:02 Monday night, less than 90 minutes after Amanda Berry's escape, the Cleveland Plain Dealers website broke the story to the world. The mayor of Cleveland first found out that the girls had been found after receiving a text from a city official. After confirming that the girls were found alive, he arranged a press release. He released a statement that said, "I am thankful that Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus, and Michelle Knight have been found alive. We have many unanswered questions regarding this case, and the investigation will be ongoing. Again, I am thankful that these young ladies were found and are alive." Across town, the FBI brought Gina's parents and older brother Ricardo to the Metro Health Medical Center for an emotional reunion. When they walked into a conference room and saw Gina for the first time in 9 years, they all rushed into each other's arms. Amanda was also reunited with her sister, Beth Serrano, at the hospital. They were photographed by nurses, posing with a smiling Jocelyn. No one came to see Michelle Knight that night, and a victim's advocate was summoned to the hospital to look after her. Detective Andrew Harasimchuk was appointed as lead investigator in the case. He was briefed at 2207 Seymour Avenue before heading to the medical center to interview the victims. There he was met by detectives Laura Parker and Cynthia Atkins, who would conduct the highly sensitive interviews. All three women identified Ariel Castro from a photograph, and then the interviews began. All of the victims said that they were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Castro, either vaginally, orally, or anally. They all described a pattern of being sexually, physically, mentally, and emotionally abused. As the news spread that the girls had been found alive, hundreds of people gathered on the streets of the West Side to celebrate. Many gathered outside the medical center, awaiting word of the women's condition. Barbara Knight was now living in Naples, Florida. She was watching the evening news when she first learned that Michelle had been found alive. She spent the rest of the evening trying to call her daughter at the medical center, but Michelle refused to take her calls. Early Tuesday morning, Gina DeJesus and Amanda Berry were discharged from the medical center and taken to a hotel at a secret location in Cleveland. The FBI had arranged 24-hour security to protect them from the media. Michelle Knight, who was still in a serious condition, remained in the hospital undergoing treatment. When Castro was being interviewed, he was very forthcoming. When he was asked a question, he answered it without hesitation. He used the word abduction several times and referred to himself as a sexual predator. He said that any of his money and belongings he wanted split equally between his 3 victims. He also said that he only knew about one of Michelle's pregnancies, and that they had conspired together on how to make her miscarry the child. More than 300 pieces of evidence, including yards of rusty chains, ropes, and bondage material, were removed from the Castro house on Seymour Avenue. It was observed that both the front and back doors would set off this makeshift alarm system if they were open. The kitchen was blocked off from the rest of the living area, so visitors to the house could not see beyond it, and a heavy curtain separated the living area from the kitchen, and attached to the kitchen was the only bathroom in the house. Next door was a dining room that Castro had converted to his bedroom and had a queen-size mattress. And then coming out of the bedroom, there was a porch swing in front of the staircase to the second floor, efficiently obstructing access to that floor. But the agents walked up the stairs, and at the top of the stairs there was a large brown curtain, totally concealing the second-level landing. They went into the front bedroom, where Amanda and Jocelyn had spent most of their time. The bedroom measured 11.5 feet by 11.5 feet. The walls were decorated with pictures of animals and cartoon characters, and there was a blackboard on one side, where Amanda had been teaching Jocelyn to read and write. The door had been modified to keep Amanda locked inside. He had taken the original door handle off, and there was just a handle attached to the outside so he could pull it to close it and lock it from the outside. And there was a hole in the door to ventilate the room. Off of Amanda and Jocelyn's room, there was an even smaller room with pink walls, measuring 7 feet 2 inches by 11.5 feet. This is the room where Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus lived. A rusty chain attached to several locks lay on the floor by a dirty mattress. Several of Michelle's paintings lined the walls. The room was also boarded up from the inside, and the only ventilation was a cutout in the ceiling for a box fan in the attic. Down in the basement, they saw the support pole in the middle where all of the girls had been chained at one point or another. And in the far end of the basement, there was a washing machine containing thousands of dollars in small bills, which Castro would throw at his victims after raping them. Ariel Castro's brothers were interviewed. They still didn't know why they were there. O'Neill said that he hadn't been to his brother's house in more than 5 years, and hadn't been upstairs in more than 7. The police showed O'Neill the picture of the girls, and he said he didn't recognize any of them. The police informed him of who the photos were of, and that all 3 women had been found in Ariel's house. O'Neill denied knowing anything about the girls being there. At the Cleveland FBI office, Amanda, Michelle, and Gina were photographed and interviewed more extensively than they had been before. Once again, the 3 victims detailed how Castro had lured them to his house. They also went into great detail about all of the beatings, rapes, and mental abuse, which were then broken down into time periods to allow prosecutors to frame the charges against Castro. Michelle was also asked about her 5 pregnancies and how Ariel Castro had caused her to miscarry each one. Back at the medical center, Michelle's brother, Freddie Knight, came to visit her. It was an emotional and happy reunion. And that same night, Barbara Knight flew from Naples, Florida, to Cleveland. She complained to reporters that she still hadn't spoken to her daughter. Barbara Knight was interviewed outside of the house at 2207 Seymour Avenue. And Barbara said that she and Michelle had had a rocky relationship. And she talked about how she had reported her as a missing person. And she was told that if she got arrested or anything, that they would let her know. But that since Michelle was 21, they treated her as a runaway and not a missing person. Ariel Castro ended up signing a 3-page written statement of everything he had confessed to over a 3-day period. He also signed photographs of each of the 3 girls, confirming them as his victims. And it was confirmed through DNA that Ariel Castro had fathered Amanda Berry's daughter, Jocelyn. June 7th, a month and a day after his arrest, the grand jury presented a 329-count indictment on Ariel Castro. The indictments only covered the period from August 2002, when Michelle Knight was kidnapped, until February of 2007. The prosecutor promised that there would be more to follow, and the investigation was still underway. This indictment included 2 counts of aggravated murder for causing the unlawful termination of Michelle's pregnancy. He was also indicted on 139 counts of rape, 177 counts of kidnapping, 7 counts of gross sexual imposition, and 3 counts of felonious assault, along with 1 single count of possessing criminal tools. Ariel Castro's attorneys announced that he would plead not guilty to all charges and warned prosecutors not to use the death penalty as a bargaining chip. They said that they were reviewing the indictment and that a not guilty plea would be put in at arraignment. His attorneys said that the death penalty was inappropriate for Castro's case because there was no medical records or evidence to prove the allegations related to the miscarriages. Castro was in court on June 12th for his arraignment. He was handcuffed and shackled and was dressed in a bright orange prison jumpsuit. He kept his head down and stared at the floor, and the plea of not guilty was entered. It was also announced that Judge Michael Russo had been assigned the case, and a pretrial hearing was scheduled for June 19th. Castro's $8 million bond was continued. The defense attorney released a statement saying that with the not guilty plea, it would force prosecutors to think hard about the death penalty aspect, and the fact that the 3 victims would have to testify in court with such a high-profile case. June 19th, Ariel Castro was back in court for his pretrial hearing. He again kept his head down and eyes shut for the entire hearing. Castro refused to look at Judge Russo. The judge asked if he was aware that they were there for his pretrial hearing, and Castro said yes without looking up. The judge also said, "You're here with your attorneys," and he asked if he had been working with him over the past few weeks. Again, Castro replied yes, but he didn't look at the judge. Judge Russo then asked the prosecution about the transfer of discovery to the defense. Prosecutor Tim McGinty said his office had now handed over all the defendants' interrogation videos and were soon going to make the victims' journals available. He said the BCI was still analyzing DNA and other forensic evidence, which would be completed sometime in July. The judge then asked what the status of any additional charges that might be presented to the grand jury was, and McGinty stated that they would be presenting new evidence to the grand jury the next 2 following weeks. They expected to request further indictments to cover the additional period. A tentative trial date was set for August 15th, and another hearing was set for the following week. A bill was introduced that would provide Amanda, Michelle, and Gina $25,000 for every year of their involuntary servitude, as well as college tuition and medical assistance. The bill had the support of both sides in the Ohio House of Representatives, and it would require a waiver to make the girls eligible for a lifetime of government medical assistance. Judge Russo ordered Ariel Castro to undergo a psychiatric competency evaluation to see if he was competent enough to stand trial. After the evaluation, Castro was found to be competent. On July 2nd, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus met for the first time since their escape. They met at the offices of the Jones Day law firm. There had been a fundraiser started for the girls called the Cleveland Courage Fund, and it had reached over $1 million. The girls had all three prepared statements to thank all the strangers that had donated to the fund. The grand jury handed down a 977-count indictment covering the entire time the three girls were imprisoned. It included 512 counts of kidnapping, 446 counts of rape, 7 counts of gross sexual imposition, 6 counts of felonious assault, 3 counts of child endangerment, and a single count of possessing criminal tools, along with the 2 counts of aggravated murder from the original indictment. A plea deal was reached between the prosecutors and the defense. Under the deal, which would put him in prison for life without the possibility of parole, plus a minimum of 1,000 years, Ariel Castro agreed to plead guilty to 937 out of the 977 counts. These included the 2 charges of aggravated murder related to terminating Michelle Knight's pregnancies. Castro told the judge that he realized he was waiving his right to a trial in signing the plea deal. He also said he wanted it on record that he had been a victim as a child of sexual abuse, and that all of his problems stemmed from that. The judge didn't let him talk much. He told him that he could talk about his problems at sentencing. At the end of the hearing, the judge told Castro that he would also have to sign over the deed to 2207 Seymour Avenue, and Castro said he didn't have a problem with that. The judge officially accepted the plea bargain and set sentencing for August 1st. And on August 1st, the courtroom was packed. People wanting to hear the sentencing of Ariel Castro and, news crews. They were all curious to find out if any of the victims were going to address the court as well. There was an exact scale model of the house at 2207 Seymour Avenue. The entire sentencing was going to be broadcasted by several news stations live. Castro was asked by the judge, again, if he understood that he was waiving his rights to a trial, and therefore giving up the ability to ever appeal the sentence. Castro said he understood. Castro asked the judge if he could apologize to his victims now, or if he should wait until the end of the day. Judge Russo advised him that he could do it now and also when he addressed the court later. The responding officers were called to the stand to describe the condition of the home when they were searching through it. They were also asked about the women's conditions when they were in the ambulance outside the home. Dr. Gerald Maloney, who was on duty at the medical center when all 3 girls came in, was also called as a witness. He told the court that all 3 girls appeared very emotionally distraught. He also spoke about Michelle's forced miscarriages. He was asked of what nature the assault that took place were described to him by the girls. The doctor said that he would describe it as forcible rape, multiple repeated times. They had also suffered physical harm while they were raped. The next witness was Detective Harris Simchuk of the Cleveland Police Department Sex Crimes Unit. He had interviewed the victims just hours after their escape at the medical center. He was told about the abduction of each girl and the torture that they endured while there. Castro began by telling the judge that he had been sexually abused as a child and that he had a long history of problems with pornography and other sexual problems. He said he was not a monster, but he was sick. He said that he believed that he is addicted to porn and it caused him to act impulsively and to do things he may not realize at the time are wrong. Castro said he wasn't trying to make any excuses and that he knew he was going to be put away forever. He then talked about how he was never abusive until he met Nilda and that she had provoked him. Castro claimed that Jocelyn always lived a normal life. He said that the accusations that he would beat the victims was totally wrong. He also told the judge that practically all of the sex was consensual, and there were times that the girls would even ask him for sex. He also said that there was harmony in the home, and then he apologized to the 3 victims, saying that he didn't know why he did it. He apologized to Jocelyn, too, and said that she was his miracle child. Judge Russo read out all 937 charges against him, and he sentenced him to the max on each one, totaling the life without parole plus 1,000 years. He was also fined $100,000 and had to forfeit everything he owned. The demolition to 2207 was attended by Michelle Knight. Gina DeJesus' aunt was the person operating the excavator. It was witnessed by more than 100 people. Michelle was holding a bunch of yellow balloons, and she said a prayer for missing children that were never found. Michelle and the neighbors released the balloons into the sky as the house was reduced to nothing but rubble. Castro created a shrine in his cell, carefully laying out photos of all of his children and family members on a poster board on his desk. Then he wrote their names on slips of paper, placing each by their photographs. He laid out many personal items around his cell, and he had his Bible open to the Gospel of St. John, chapters 1 and 2, and he left the Bible on the floor. He also wrote out a passage from chapter 3 on a sheet of paper. It said, "No one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." Castro then took his bed sheet, tied knots in it to form a ligature, secured several inches of it around the window frame, which was 7 feet above the ground, and then wrapped it around his neck. He undid his shorts until they fell to his ankles, and then facing his cell door, he dropped to his knees. The ligature tightened until he was no longer breathing. This was September 3rd, 2013, about 1 month into his sentence. At 9:15, a guard was doing his regular rounds and cell count. He reached Ariel Castro's cell a few minutes later, and he found Castro hanging from the bed sheet from his window. After yelling for help, 3 guards attempted to revive him, with no luck. Although they did not stop trying even once the ambulance arrived, they continued chest compressions all the way to the hospital. And at 10:52, Ariel Castro was pronounced dead. Amanda Berry has become an advocate for the missing since her escape, but she said her life today is full of routine activities that center around her family, particularly her 11-year-old daughter. She has recently taken on a job at a news station, and she helps host a segment reporting stories about missing people. She also co-wrote a book with Gina DeJesus titled Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. In November 2013, Michelle Knight spoke to television host Dr. Phil McGraw about her ordeal. In May 2014, she wrote Finding Me, A Decade of Darkness, A Life Reclaimed, a memoir of the Cleveland kidnappings, about her experience. Michelle has since legally changed her name to Lily Rose Lee to better reflect who she is and to help her move on with her new life. Gina DeJesus has been enjoying a quiet life with her close-knit family, living in a new home in the suburbs of Cleveland. She also co-wrote Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland, with Amanda Berry. Okay, guys. That's all I have for the case of Ariel Castro and the 3 lost girls. Don't forget you can follow me on Twitter at Fatal Podcast, or you can email me using fatalpodcast@gmail.com. And I'm just going to ask one more time, would you please rate and review this podcast? It helps more than you know. As for the contest, for you guys to tell me the scariest thing that ever happened to you, I have chosen Amy Derrick as our winner. Here's her entry. Amy writes, I was really young, in 6th grade I think, and I was babysitting for a family that lived a couple of streets over from us. The baby was already asleep when I got there, so I was basically just there if he woke up. It started storming pretty bad with a lot of lightning, and at one point I looked out a window at the exact same time that lightning struck, and someone was looking in the window at me. I freaked out and called my dad, and he came over but was unable to find anyone. It has scarred me for life. I now hate to go anywhere that there are no coverings on the windows, and if someone forgot to fix the blinds or curtains and left them open, I promptly shut them. Yeah, that's totally a freaky story, Amy. It would have scared me too. So keep your eye on your phone. I will be texting you or calling you to get your address so I can send you some Fatal swag. And hopefully we'll have some more contests like this soon. I had, a few entries, not a whole lot, maybe 10 or so. So that's a start anyway. And I also just want to remind you all that we are on Patreon now. So if any of you would like to become a supporter of Patreon for Fatal, just go to patreon.com/fatalpodcast. If you would like to give just a one-time donation, you can actually do that through my PayPal account. And the email address for that is beth.mccarty@outlook.com. All right, guys. Thanks again for listening. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to review and tune in next week. Hope you all have a great week. Thanks. Bye.